Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a special edition of our show tonight dedicated to those people who are serving time in prison, in a lot of cases life without the possibility of parole, for marijuana crimes. And we have people here who've been directly impacted by that tonight. Right now behind me here, we've got Jeff Eichen, who is producing a movie called Lifers about people who are in prison. We'll be talking more about that in a moment. Right on the other side of the wild and crazy guy, Casper Leach, here is Kristen Floor, who has had her family tortured and murdered, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And Mindy Griffith. Welcome to the show, ladies. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Casper Leach.
Yeah, good to see you again, Casper.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So normally we have news and a music interlude, but we're not doing that tonight. We're just going to go straight to the guests, and because it's a very important topic for us. And one of the reasons is, or motivated us to be here is, but first, we'll buy a few crucial seconds with our infamous dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, and so we're going to start with Kristen Floor because her family has been horribly impacted by the shifting sands of medical marijuana, specifically in the state of Montana. I went to Montana and started helping people in Missoula, Billings, Butte, Bozeman, and Helena get medical marijuana cards back starting in 2008. So I met a lot of the folks just as we were working with some of the first doctors who went out and helped people do that. And there were some bad players that came into the game, specifically, as I recall, a guy named Jason Christ, who really degraded the whole program and made a mockery of it by getting doctors to sign forms in other states, and he just rubber stamped them, and he'd see 1,000 people a day and get them their medical marijuana permits after kind of ripping off our process and acting like he was helping. But I met some people who were involved with Kristen. You want to tell us about what happened with your family and starting in 2011?
If you remember, Paul, the laws in Montana were really good back then.
They were.
They were really
among the
good.
Best.
Yes.
And you know, Western Montana has some of the highest rates of usage of cannabis in the whole country, as high as we have here in Portland.
Yes, they do. In fact, they almost had, their laws were even better than California's at the time.
Yeah.
You know, the federal government, they were very intimidated, I believe, by those state laws. And if you remember, 2011, while the state was voting to repeal the Montana state law, the federal government raided 26 dispensaries across Montana. Well, my dad co-owned 5 of those. And he owned the companies with some really big advocates, but that got the laws passed, and that really good growers, like my dad followed all the laws, and the company tried to live right by the standards of what they were paying taxes, what they were supposed to be doing. In fact, you can watch a video called Code of the West, which talks about exactly what happened. While they were raiding, they were voting to repeal the law. And so after the raids, my father was one, he co-owned Montana Cannabis, 5 of the dispensaries that he co-owned. Well, my dad was really sick, and he was trying to go to trial, but they wouldn't let him go to trial because he had dementia. Well, eventually, after fighting his case for so long, he was so sick, he went to 3 different prisons. None of them took care of him. he ended up getting sentenced to 5 years in prison. He ended up taking a deal because they said he couldn't go to trial because of his dementia. Well, my dad also had osteoporosis, and he had heart conditions and liver conditions and all sorts of stuff going on. But they sent him to prison anyway. And when he got to prison, they didn't take care of him. In fact, they neglected him basically to death because in federal prisons, they don't have any good medical care at all. So my dad was suffering from dementia, osteoporosis. He was rocking back and forth. He'd hit the ground and he'd break his bones. And they just let him lay there in prison and not give him any help. But in the meantime, his stomach was hurting him, and he would tell the nurses, "Oh, I'm sick," and they would accuse him of faking it in the middle of the night. They never once took him to a hospital. And if I remember, my dad followed all the state laws and he helped people. He actually never hurt anybody. So here's my dad stuck in prison, suffering, not able to get any medical attention, dying. And basically, he also had heart problems, and he was on 32 medicines. And when he passed away, he was only on 3, but they were transporting him, and he had 2 major heart attacks. And I had to fly out to Las Vegas, Nevada, and take my father off of life support while he was still shackled to a hospital bed. Okay, even though he followed all the state laws, he still went to prison, still suffered, and still died in federal custody.
So he was unconscious. Basically, brain dead, I take it, when you turned off the machinery?
Okay, see, this is the thing, Paul, okay? When I got there, he was basically dead. He was on life support. They were waiting for me to get there to take him off the life support. But when I got there, he came back to life, and his body started shaking. He was so happy to see me after all the time of being neglected and being abused. And my mom, okay, so my mom is also in prison at this time.
So they were both incarcerated. Was it simultaneously?
At the same time, yeah.
Did you have other family members outside of your mother and father?
Yes, but I don't talk about them.
Okay.
I concentrate on my mom and dad.
Yeah.
But yes, my mom was in prison at the time, and so while my dad was just came back to life while I was there, she called me, and I put the phone up to my dad's ear, and he came back to life and started shaking again, and I got off the phone with my mom from prison. And a few minutes later, they told me he wasn't going to make it, and that he was growing cancer. So the whole entire time, he didn't even die from the heart attacks. He was saying that his stomach hurt, and cancer was growing in his stomach, and cancer was just killing him. And so he died, and I had to take him off life support. And I walked out of the hospital.
In the Las Vegas jail?
No, he would. This is the first time.
They moved into the real hospital then?
For the first time, yes. So I had to walk out of that hospital, but as I was leaving, I just stopped and I looked in the room and see what was going on. And they had uncovered him, and his ankle was still chained to the bed. And he couldn't even die a free man. And my dad never hurt anybody. So then I had to go. He only helped people.
He was there for helping people get medical marijuana.
He's known for helping patients in Montana. And so then
that's
after
Richard Floor.
Richard Floor. And I have my dad's ashes with me because I take them everywhere. Since my dad's died, I've been an advocate. I've been talking on stages. I've been doing all kinds of stuff. But everywhere I go, I take his ashes with me. So he is always remembered. But
where's your mother now?
Now, the next morning, okay, I had to tell my mom, who was in prison. She got sentenced too as well. And so I had to tell her that my dad, mind you, they were married for 36 years. And I had to tell her that my dad passed away. And so then what happened is my mom...
And where was she at? Was she already in her prison?
Yeah, she was in a prison camp in
women's
Arizona.
Prison? A federal institution.
And she had to come home after she served all her time. And then she's home with me now, and she's on probation. And she's been on probation for 2 of the 4 years. And out of those 2 years, if you serve half the time, you can get off good time. So we're waiting right now to find out if she's going to be free of her last 2-year sentence. But in the meantime, we do have an open and active lawsuit against the CCA prisons. It was a private prison, and I actually have to go give testimony next month about 2 weeks about what they did to him.
Where at?
And the thing is kind of weird is that the federal government is hearing the case. The federal government is kind of what caused all this. So it's kind of intimidating knowing that they're hearing a case against a private prison that they work really well with.
Is it in Nevada?
No,
or in Montana?
Well, the CCA prisons is a prison system around the whole nation.
Right, but your case where you'll have to testify.
The case is out of Billings, Montana, yes.
Out of Billings, Montana,
yes.
okay. The state capital.
Right. So that's, you know, and after he died, his partner, Chris Williams, he went to trial. And what happens when you go to trial?
Chris was a lawyer, too.
No, that was Chris Lindsay.
Chris Lindsay, I'm confused.
Chris
Okay.
Lindsay was the attorney.
Oh, yeah. Chris Williams has fought the good fight here and never, you know, pled guilty through all of this and suffered a big price because of it.
Yep, he went to trial and lost, and he was facing 96 mandatory minimum years. But like, I ran into Stacy Tice, who has the big green Cannabis, and we took this big journey up to Montana. We got all kinds of court support, and the judge only sentenced him to 5. So, you know, we stood out there and rallied, and it helped him a lot. So
now he was sentenced to 5 years, but his son was just like 16 or something.
He was 15.
15.
Yes, 15. He was in college.
So he'd gotten out of high school and started college at the age of 15.
Yes. But, you know, without his dad, he struggled to maintain that.
Yeah, I can't imagine a 15-year-old meeting that kind of stress.
Right.
With his father in federal prison.
Right. Well, so after that, you know, Chris was found guilty in federal trial. And that's the thing, is that, you know, one of the jurors could have said not guilty and he'd be free. So since then, you know, I started fighting for I found out about so many prisoners. One of the first prisoners that I found out about was Luke Scarmazzo, who went to trial in California. This is Luke, and this is Luke's daughter. He left his daughter when I believe she was 4 years old, and he owned dispensaries down in California, and he went to trial. I found out that he was serving a 22-year sentence, him and his partner, Ricardo. And so I was so compelled, and I didn't know there are so many people in prison for a plant, but I started fighting for Luke, and I started fighting for the Duval family, this happened in Michigan, because they just didn't raid in Montana. They raided all across the nation. And then after that, I started finding out about all the other prisoners. In fact, I found out that there's over 50 of them serving life sentences.
50 mainly men.
Yep, 50 people serving life sentences. So is what I did.
Just for marijuana?
Just for marijuana.
Yeah, who didn't have any
Nope.
violence? Or
Some of them did. No violence. All just for marijuana. Some of them had a few priors here and there, but never something that would deserve a life sentence. So is what happened is I became the vice president for the Human Solution International, and I started leading, helping to build chapters across the nation, and I ended up basically leaving the Human Solution to pursue something called VOW, Voices of the Cannabis War, because I believe that is very, very important, our voices, in order to get the message across that nobody should go to jail for a plant, and to get these prisoners' messages out there. Like you, Paul, you're surprised to find out that there's 50 people serving life sentences.
Yeah,
So,
I've known about it. I've tried to
right.
publicize. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But
For sure,
yeah, I just
for
wanted
sure.
you to.
But that's who I
emphasize
am.
it.
I am Kristen Floor, and I just believe that nobody should have to go to jail or die for a plant.
And so, your father was basically killed by this marijuana law.
Definitely.
Tortured in his illness.
Yes.
And died a horrible death. I'm
Right.
so happy, at least he, could acknowledge on some level that you and his wife were able to say something to him.
Right. Well, the
your
thing is,
past,
too, is that he died only for the simple reason that marijuana is still a federally Schedule I drug. Had it not been a Schedule I drug, none of this would have happened. In fact, our prisoners would be free, and this war wouldn't be going on today.
I just think it's amazing that there he is among so many different humans, and they allow that to just go
That
on.
inhumane
Yeah.
negligence.
For sure.
So I certainly wish you well in your civil suit, even though that's small comfort for the
sure.
horrible things your family's been put through.
For sure, for sure. Definitely doing what I can. I would just like, with that suit, I would just like to fight for justice. I don't think that even for marijuana, I don't think anybody should be treated like that in prison. If it's a nonviolent crime, like I don't even think anybody should go to prison for nonviolent crimes. There should be other ways of punishment or help to give a lot of people.
Well, just to think that people are going to prison at all for nonviolent crimes, but to look at 5 years or life without the possibility of parole, it's a travesty that we've taken the oldest crop that's been cultivated at least 12,000 years, the most productive crop for fuel, fiber, food, and medicine, and that's the one that's been made illegal just for the benefit of a small group of industrialists, that
Yes.
rule the world today, really.
Well, and President Obama has been making headline news about releasing nonviolent criminals. Have you not been able to get an audience with him? What kind of lawyer do you have? Are you working with the ACLU?
No, it's just a case. My dad's attorney, who representing him in this federal case, is representing us in this case. But you were talking, Paul, about the prisoners and about the prison conditions, and I just want to talk just a little bit about it, because when you're sent to prison, I think one of the big reasons why this happened to my dad, because when you're sent to prison, they force our prisoners to work for basically less than 12 cents an hour. They're shackled, all of our plant prisoners, they're shackled every single day, and they're forced to eat food that says not, what does it say? Not
fit for human consumption.
And it says that right on the boxes. And they are forced to work for 12 cents an hour, sometimes up to 40 hours a week. And so when they're sitting back there, and they're working, they're making things for the government, they're making McDonald's cups, they're making crazy things out there. So I do believe that if you can't work for them, they're not going to want to give you medical, then they're just not going to take care of you. So I really believe that our sick people in prison, like Chris Martin, who was in an Arizona prison just recently for medical marijuana, they were basically torturing him to the point where he was wondering if he was going to survive. And we got all kinds of attention for Chris Martin, and we called the prisons, because like when my dad was in prison, there wasn't a lot of people who knew what was going on. So like now that the voices of the cannabis war want to get the voices out there, we were able to get Chris Martin help. So the same things didn't happen to Chris Martin that happened to my dad. But all those other prisoners out there, there's so many sick ones. Like this guy right here, his name is Antonio Basquero. And Antonio Basquero has been in prison for 36 years. Okay.
For marijuana.
He's serving a life sentence for marijuana. And
longest prisoner in America.
Longest one's still there today. There's several that passed, but.
Yep, and then Antonio, he is known as a Cuban war hero. Like he is looked up to in his country. He's not even from our country, and he's been in there for 36 years. And how old is he, Mindy? Is he like 72, 73 years old?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and his daughter hasn't seen him. In fact, I host a radio show where we have had his daughter call in and tell his story. So you can hear all about Antonio's story on our radio show. In fact, we've got letters right here for Antonio that we're trying to get people to sign so that we can send to the President of the United States, asking them to grant him clemency.
I know that you had a set of letters at our Hempstock Festival. Is this a different set of letters?
These are the same prisoners, basically. Okay, so guess what, Paul? At your Hempstock, okay, we got almost 200 letters signed for a man by the name of Billy Deacle.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Billy Deacle has been in prison for 24 years. Okay, well, guess what? We sent those letters to the pardons attorney. The pardons attorney sends them to the president, and the president freed him. So all the work that you let us do at your Hempstock got a prisoner free. Just
wonderful.
less than 2 weeks ago, he was free. So
Hallelujah.
Thank you for letting us have you there.
Hey, it's an honor.
You helped us out.
One thing, just briefly, I went through a federal trial back in 1993,
Yes,
December of 93, where I had gone through a state trial in 87, and I never pled guilty. They offered me a 5-year prison deal in 1993. So I didn't take that. I went to trial, and I was facing 10 years because I didn't take the 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. So they were going to enhance it based on the prior conviction. So fortunately, we didn't call any witnesses, present any evidence. We just cross-examined the witnesses that the prosecution called. And it came out that I was facing 10 years from some other testimony of one of their witnesses. It came out that there was jury nullification because they introduced my library that had a chapter in one of the books on jury nullification.
Nice.
And so the prosecutor objected, and the judge ruled, fortunately, that he couldn't object to his own evidence, which is his normal standard of proof. Just imagine if the prosecutor who gave the glove to OJ said, "Oh, objection, you can't consider that anymore."
Right.
And so it was that kind of thing. But in the end, after the jury was out for 3 days, the judge said if he took it under advisement, he would find me not guilty of cultivation.
Nice.
and guilty of possession of 2 grams of marijuana in my pocket. And so it was a lot better.
Let's talk about that for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Had you went to prison for 10 years, had you been found guilty, you would
Yeah,
have been
we never
faced-
would have started our clinics.
See?
We never would have, my youngest son wouldn't have been born. God knows what would have happened, you know.
Well, let's talk about that. All these prisoners right here, if they all, most of them, that's how our lifers end up getting life, is because,
Because they don't cooperate.
right, because they don't cooperate. And once they go to prison,
You want to hand some to Casper? He'll be
sure,
happy to hold
once
them
they go to trial, they're facing a mandatory minimum sentence. That means that the judge has no other option other than to sentence them to a possibility of life. And yes, you can get life in a federal prison for marijuana. You don't get life for murder. But
If I was convicted now
right.
for more than 100 plants, I would be subject to life without the possibility of parole.
Corvain Cooper, right here, 2 years ago, he was sentenced to life. So they are still passing down life sentences.
Where was
for
he
them.
at?
He's in California.
Okay.
So one thing I want to talk about, Paul, is you mentioned jury nullification. All these prisoners, except for Craig, he made a plea deal and still got life. But all these prisoners up here would not have went to prison if just one of the jurors knew their power, and that's the power to say not guilty. Okay, you know, if you're a juror, you're presented all this evidence that the defendant broke the law, and you're made to look into the most terrible person in the world. And then
But they are
say,
not allowed, the jurors are not allowed to know what the sentence is going to be.
Right.
And I lucked out in terms of one of their witnesses said, "Why are you testifying?" My lawyer said, "Why are you testifying against Mr. Stanford?"
Right.
And he said, "So I won't do 10 years in
Yes.
prison because they told me I'd do 10 years in prison if I didn't testify against him." And so that's where the jury found out I was facing 10 years of prison. They thought it was a slap on the wrist thing.
Right.
You know, we're in Oregon after all, you know.
Right. They're not only are they not known the whole how much time you're facing, but they don't know the whole truth. And what happens is the judge, they buy the jurors lunch and they put them up in a really fancy hotel. And what happens is they're manipulated into believing that they have to base their judgment on if the defendant broke the laws. But that's not even true. Jurors, they can judge the law, and not only if the law has been broken. And if a juror thinks it's a bad law, all it takes is one to stand up and say not guilty, and that would free you of your 10-year sentence. It would have freed all of our prisoners of their life sentence. And all you have to remember is if you think the law is bad and you don't think somebody should go to jail for it, like there's no victim, you have the power to say not guilty. We can end this whole world right now by just refusing to convict.
But if the prosecuting attorneys know that you know that, they will kick you off the jury.
For sure.
So you're
For
not
sure.
supposed to divulge that information while you're going through the jury selection process. It's also called voir dire
Yep.
in the Latin phrase.
Yep.
But it's not something that, you know, you will be kicked off the jury
Yep.
if you raise that outside of the jury room after the trial is entered
Right.
deliberations.
Well, Paul, in Washington, I just sat in a federal trial for Lance Glore. In fact, those 2011 raids that I was just talking about, a few of those raids not just happened in Michigan and Washington, but some of those raids happened right up in Washington, where I'm from. And Lance Glore was raided 2011 and one time since. And when at his trial, the same thing happened. In fact, it was the first trial ever that they allowed a medical defense in the federal courthouse. But what had happened is they had all of his family members, his ex-girlfriends, everybody testify against him, his business partners.
So they wouldn't go to jail.
So they wouldn't go to
basically.
jail. And they said that too,
Yeah.
just like they did in yours. They said that. And there was one of the jurors that was a medical marijuana patient. And she got anxiety because she was on federal time and she couldn't smoke. And so 4 days after deliberating, she ended up having to go to the hospital. And after they put in the replacement juror, a few hours later he was found guilty. And he is now in federal custody with my dad's business partner in the CTAC, Federal Bureau of Prisons in Washington, where we call it legal.
Well, you know, even though they call it legal in Washington, if you have 29 grams or a gram more than an ounce, it's still a misdemeanor, and you have to spend 1 day in jail under state law.
Wow.
And if you have 40 grams or more and no medical marijuana permit, that's a felony, still
Right.
under Washington law. So I don't
Right.
really call it legalization. I call it decriminalization with a little bit of regulation in there.
You got to spend 1 day or
A minimum of one
minimum
day
of 1
in
day.
jail under the possession of under 40 grams law.
Sounds like more hassle than that.
You'd
would
think
be
the
worse.
Washington legislature would have some integrity and change that given the vote of the people in I-502. But let me go ahead and introduce our rest of our guests here. We're about halfway through our show, and we've got Mindy Griffith here. Mindy, you've been working on just this prisoner rights issue here in Portland, right?
Correct. I've talked to prisoners all over the country, but I got hooked up with Kristen. We went to court sport. She told me her story, and
Joy Graves.
I've been hooked ever since. I spend my
All right.
time trying to get the word out for them.
Well, thank you for
Mindy
doing
produces
that.
our radio show.
All right. And how do
Where's
people...
your show heard at?
It's a blog talk radio show. It's called Voices of the Cannabis War. Mindy produces it. I host it. And Eugene Fisher, Eugene Fisher served a life sentence. He got out after 25 years. He's the other host of the show. So Mindy helps arrange people to come on the show, and she tells us when we're talking too much, and she helps us structure the show.
Great. And also here tonight with you, at your request, we've got Jeff Eichen.
Yep.
And Jeff, welcome again to the show.
Thank you
And
so
you've been
much.
working on a documentary. It says on this thing that this is called Lifers, and it's a documentary about people in prison for life without the possibility of parole for marijuana.
For their belief in marijuana, and I'm actually getting into the prison system. I'm going in with my film crew, and I'm actually filming and getting the spoken word while the prisoners are still behind bars, and so I'm being their voice so they have an opportunity.
So you've got a chance recently, a person who was in Missouri prison for life without the possibility of parole, Jeff Mazansky,
Yes.
was released, and you interviewed him before he was released.
In June, I went in and I was granted by the parole PR person. There's actually somebody like that, and I'm learning so much. And I'm
So this picture is in federal prison or in state prison.
that's
in
in
Missouri.
the state correctional system in Missouri.
Right. Okay.
And I got in there and filmed Jeff for an hour, and Bear Claw, who was the young warden who let me in there and check my cameras and all my cavities on my cameras, wouldn't let me wear my hat, and we went in with all the protocol. He just waved at me after my hour was up, and he said, "Keep rolling." He said, "Keep rolling."
Nice.
So Jeff Mazansky, because they understand, everybody who works at these prisons that I'm going to, they welcome these interviews because they want to get the word out also, as well as I do, to expose their feelings, their heart, that these are real people, and nobody, as we are saying, should be in prison for a plant.
How long was
obviously.
Jeff in prison before
21
he was?
years and 9 months.
And he was looking at life. And how did that change?
Governor Nixon, I believe it was a PR deal. I think he was up for re-election or something like that. But Jeff was going in for parole. I was in June, and in July, I pulled a green candle vigil on Google chat room, and we were in Uruguay, Amsterdam, New York, LA, Miami, and we all met and we lit green candles at one time the night before, at midnight, before Jeff went in the next day, and we all prayed that he would have a successful parole board hearing, and he did. And Governor Nixon, praise Governor Nixon, allowed him to be out. But the odd thing is that a lot of these prisoners are getting out on parole. They're not getting clemency, and so they're still having to stay in halfway houses, and they have no money. They have no restitution, and they have no word. But Jeff now is traveling the country with me.
So was he put on parole or when he got out?
He is still on parole, but they're allowing him to go to HempFest. They're allowing him to go to different cannabis award ceremonies.
That's amazing.
And
That's
to
a
be
great
on
thing.
panel. So he's going to be my poster child, and we love him. He's articulate, and he said while I was in prison with him, I was sitting next to him doing an interview, and I decided that I was going to pull back and stand by the camera and just focus on him. It was so breathtaking and opened my heart so much I couldn't move away from him. And when he told me, he said, "For God's sakes, rapers are coming and going. the same guy I see coming and going. And he said, and we were smoking it for free on my first cut of my interview with Jeff. Then I produced my own videos so far until I get, you know, somebody big to do my videos. Michael Moore here, you hear me, Michael? So anybody wants to get in, call me and lifersamovie.com.
We have a film clip with Jeff Mazansky here. We're going to run about 6 minutes of that, and we'll be back right after this film clip. See you in a minute.
Thank you, folks. And here we go. Okay, that's it. Out.
Unfortunately, with the internet, from what I understand, a lot of my stories have already been out around the whole globe. And what I'm hoping is that it actually brings awareness to people of the harm it's doing. Not only the guys that are locked up, but their families. And how about the money they're spending keeping these guys locked up.
Lifers, scene 1 plus 1, take 1.
I mean, hearing these stories today, as if I'm not inspired enough to be hopefully one of the people that is leading this battle. You hear about veterans, you hear about children that need this medicine, and it's absolutely insane.
Today we're here all the way in Missouri from Washington State, and we're beginning our movie Lifers. This is the movie set. And then I'll get to know you, get to know me.
It'd be great. People need it.
Yeah.
Sure do, buddy.
Yeah. So I've been in this a long time, 30 years, and Jack Herrera was in my living room writing the book Emperor.
I copied that book.
He was writing.
It just don't make sense. Just spending this time in prison means getting that done. Doesn't all be worth it. And we weren't getting arrested for it. Actually, they'd stop us, take our beer away, but they'd give our marijuana back. You know? So, that was no big thing then. But then people are older now, and they've smoked it, they've tried it, they know the lies, because they've tried it.
Right.
That's one thing that's going good for us, because they're actually out there spreading it. No, what you've been told all these years is a lot of lies.
So did you see this coming, that the time we're in right now, that the dominoes would start to fall? Or did you pray for it?
I prayed for it, but being in here, I was really not privy to a lot of that.
Because you didn't get news?
We get news on the TV, and I hear things here and there, and a little bit out of the newspapers, but as far as the effect of what really must be out there, and I probably still don't know it all, you know, I just am now really catching up on a lot of things.
Sure.
Like the medical marijuana, how it's helping. I see where it's helping the kids that are having the epileptic.
The Charlotte's Web.
Right.
You heard about that story.
Yeah, and you know, that's great. But how about all these kids that suffered through all these years because of the lies that we were told?
Right. Reefer madness.
There you go.
Right.
That was one of the first. Do we really have it now? I don't think so. We have some freedoms. We're losing a lot of them. But for something that's not hurting people, they're taking away and locking you up.
Right.
What kind of freedom is that? I've been trying to learn all the facts I can about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come a long way from where I was. But
Do you know they're making a hemp car now? They can make hemp plastic.
I've seen that on the news.
The hemp car is cool.
I about fell out of our bunk when I was walked in. I couldn't believe that. That's great. So why are we paying farmers now to leave their fields unplanted? when we could be planting hemp in there, using it and developing a whole big industry instead of importing it from China.
Right. Right. They're not making it.
Okay. Lifers, scene 1+1, take 1.
So Jeff, this movie's currently in production.
We're in production, and we're going to roll our first episode. This is a 6-part episode film documentary that we're going to be raising money for from lifersthemovie.com, and we're right now being sponsored by HempFest, and Sharon and Vivian have signed on, and they're going to show our first episode during HempFest in August in Seattle.
Nice.
All right.
So we're really proud to be the voice of the people and of Jeff Mazansky. You have a picture there that I took that
Looks like the real first thing here. Let's put it back in the wrapper.
well, I asked Jeff on this photograph. I asked Jeff, I said, did you ever think we'd see the day where we'd see a marijuana leaf on the cover of National Geographic? When I was growing up, it was animals, or it was, famous people or people from another tribe on National Geographic. So we've come a long ways, but we're not close. And so I want to be their voice. I want Lifers the Movie to go global, and I want marijuana. I want to not stop until prohibition is ended.
So your website is lifersthemovie.com.
Yes, sir.
lifersthemovie.com. So tomorrow,
Yes.
Mindy has organized a local event, taking
No,
it to the
Miss
street.
Kristen.
Oh, it's Kristen.
Kristen
It was both of
organized
you.
it.
Tell me more.
Here's what's going on tomorrow. So Mindy and I and a few other volunteers from Washington, all around, we've gotten addicted.
So that's going to be April 2nd.
Yeah, April
Tomorrow,
2nd.
April
Yes,
2nd.
we've gotten
My
addicted
birthday.
to getting these letters signed, and we've got an event called Taking It to the Streets. So basically, we always go to hemp fests and things like that where people automatically agree to what we say, and we get all these signatures. But we need more. We need everybody outside our movement to believe that nobody should go to jail for a plant. So we're taking it to the streets of Portland tomorrow. We're just going to ask the average people, will you sign our letters, and try to hold our signs, which these particular signs, what we're doing tomorrow can be done anywhere. You can go to Can-Do, you can go to Lifers, what is the Life, Sherry Sicard's group?
Oh, it's a new one.
Yeah, but you can download these.
Those images
Yes,
and that
and you can
information
get
and
these
it laminated?
letters. Yeah, it's Lifers Project. You can go to that.com.
Lifersproject.com.
Yeah, and the really cool thing is that Jeff Eichen is going to be with us tomorrow with his cameras, shooting these documentaries as we try to educate the public about what's going on behind marijuana prohibition. So if you want to come out tomorrow, the event is from 11 to 1 at what's called Courthouse Square.
Pioneer Courthouse Square.
Pioneer Courthouse Square. We'll stay past 1 if we're getting a bunch of letters signed. But just come out 11. You can help us get letters signed, or you can sign the letters too. But you can be part of history in the making and help represent our prisoners. The 4 prisoners we're advocating for tomorrow is John Knock, who was sentenced. And Paul, I don't understand this. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 20 years. So does that mean you have to leave Earth twice and then come back, and then you still owe the government 20 years?
That's it.
Is that how
You
that
got
works?
it. You got it.
Another guy we're getting letters for right here is Craig Cecil. Craig Cecil is serving his 13th year in prison. Craig Cecil he risks going on lockdown every single Sunday to call into our radio show to tell our listeners what's going on behind bars. So, not just for him, but we've also got Antonio Basquero, who's the longest serving prisoner, and Farrell. We got letters for Farrell Scott.
Farrell Scott.
Yep, so you can come down and help these 4 guys out. All these guys who are serving all these sentences, I just want to let everybody know that they're not criminals, they're heroes, because back in the 80s, the federal government, the war was really bad. We didn't have any state laws anywhere. And so if we risked growing it on United States land, we risked getting shot down by the federal government, like Stacy Tice's uncle, Gary Shepard, who was shot down 21 times, and his wife was also shot down while they held their son 21 years ago. Well, Stacy Tice rides a big green bus across the nation now to advocate for our prisoners. So basically, we couldn't do it back then. It was really illegal to grow it. So we had to have a lot of these guys who are serving life sentences bring it to us. And they brought it to us in all kinds of ways. They flew it here. They shipped it here in ships. That's what Eugene did. He shipped a lot of it here. And they also flew planes, which, you know, I've heard all kinds of stories. And we have a radio show that tells the history of it, where we actually had the guys that's been released that did this tell us what happened and all the stories back from the 80s and how they snuck it in. It's really cool. But they risked getting it here for us, and we needed it just as much in the 80s as we need it now. So yeah, they brought in a lot, but we needed it because we couldn't get it here. So we just got to look up to them.
What our friend Jack Harrer used to say is, we're saving the plant that's going to save the planet.
Right.
That's what he often said.
Right.
And I'm interested to hear Jeff's story in that video clip, because while Jack helped edit his book with Ellen Comp in your home back in 96. He
did the revision in 96, yeah.
Yeah, it went through, I think, 13 editions altogether so far. But the very first edition was written in my house back in 1985, right here in Portland.
And the Hemp Angels brought us together.
Indeed, indeed.
Together.
So,
Praise the Hemp Angels.
Yeah.
And Jack often said...
and Casper worked for Jack in the early 90s, right?
At the end of all these speeches, Jack usually concluded by stating that when we change the laws and when we start making cells, that still doesn't mean the war is over, because the war is not over till we get all of our prisoners home.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between this war and so many other wars, is that at the end of World War II or the Korean War or whatever, soldiers most generally came home, and we quit holding the prisoners of our foreign enemy. And here the enemy is our own brothers and sisters, and it's been a civil war, but it's been a war that's been waged by attorneys and by congressmen and by senators. And
well, you know, it's really
interesting. We can only fight back the same way.
Just last week, the article in Harper's Magazine written by Dan Baum in his interview with Nixon aide John Ehrlichman. Nixon was prosecuted and went to prison himself as an aide to President Nixon for his work in Watergate, but he admitted to Dan Baum that they knew all along that they were lying about marijuana and heroin, and that the reason they ramped up the war on drugs to start with the Controlled Substances Act in 1972, was so they could put more black people and more left-wing activists in jail. And they knew they were lying on at the time. And so it was first implemented based on lies by, as our late great friend Gatewood Galbraith said, the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches who didn't want us to have hemp seed oil to run our cars. Here's our hemp flame for freedom. We like to tell people the only reason marijuana is illegal is because it's the most productive biofuel on this planet. And you can take raw hemp seed oil, cold press, pour it right into a diesel engine and turn the key and drive on it. And the byproduct of getting 300 gallons or more per acre is 6,000 pounds or 3 tons of high protein hemp seed meal, 25 tons of hemp hurd fiber, the inner woody core of the hemp stalk, and 10 tons of hemp bast fiber for canvas lace and linen. And so that's the outer bark of the hemp fiber. So, cannabis prohibition has always been about money and power and the continued centralization of economic and political control. And drugs have always been a smokescreen.
No more trees for paper.
Yeah, we can stop deforestation when we start using hemp for fuel, and wipe out world hunger. And instead of sending all of our money to the Saudi sheiks and the Nigerian despots and ExxonMobil and their Swiss bank accounts, the money will go to our farmers.
We won't be fracking
and
either.
The farmers will be spending it in our community. So instead of the continued centralization of economic power and control, we'll see a natural decentralization.
And food from hemp seed.
Food from hemp seed.
Yeah. I have one thing to add about my film. We're not going to only focus on the marijuana lifers. We're going to bring in an episode about all lifers that are in jail unjustly for non-violent crimes.
Good, good. So you wanted to talk about prison conditions?
Yeah, we talked about a little bit about how they, force our prisoners to work for less than 12 cents an hour, and they don't provide them with proper medical care.
They charge a lot to even call home.
Yes. Oh, Mindy, you
Just
should
to
tell them
Like
about
$2
the
a
phone
minute
calls.
or something
What?
to talk to somebody in jail.
What?
And
Yeah.
the prison keeps that money. I mean, they're spending, like 2 cents a minute, and they're keeping that other $1.98 or $2.50 a minute for running the prison.
The private
FCC
prisons.
brought down
Yeah.
new rules saying that those rates needed to come down. They were supposed to be implemented in March, and the federal.
It's March now.
Yeah.
It is. Well, it's past March. Oregon has addressed that and has changed their numbers. I hear some other states have, but the federal government has put a stand on that and is trying to appeal this decision by the FCC. So the federal prison is not listening to the federal communications people. It's kind of interesting.
Is Obama recognizing any of the marijuana prisoners? I know 2 got out for old age.
This last 61, not a single one were marijuana lifers.
And that was just yesterday or the day before. He
Right.
granted 61 prisoners clemency, and none of them
Right.
were for the plant.
My movie will focus on them.
Perfect.
We'll get them heard.
For sure. For sure. I do want to mention other groups out there.
Yeah, we're down to about 7 minutes here.
Okay. Okay. Well, we've got a couple other groups. One thing is there's the Human Solution. They do court support and they do prison outreach. So if you want to get involved, you can go to the Human THSINTL. There's another group called POW 420, and you can get a lot of prisoners there.
Good name.
Yep, and there's another group called Freedom Grow. Okay, that is a group that Stephanie Landa puts on, and Stephanie Landa was an ex-POW. In fact, she calls into my radio show every week, and she goes to events and she sells things, and she raises a lot of commissary money. Last month, she raised over $7,000, and over 70 of our prisoners got $100 each on their books.
All right.
Yes, so
Nice.
if you want to donate to Prisoners Commissary, which is very important because they do only make 12 cents an hour, you can go to, it's a nonprofit group, it's freedomgrow.org. There's also the Can Do Clemency Project where Amy Pova, she works for all kinds of prisoners. A whole bunch of them are plant prisoners, and you can download signs here. You can also get letters on her website. And then there's Marijuana Lifers Project that Sherry Sicard does, and she has a set of signs also and letters, and they've got petitions on their websites that you can sign for our plant prisoners. So if I encourage everybody watching to get involved in prison outreach. Go to the groups that I told you about, find out what group is right for you, and really get active. It takes a whole nation to end the war. So.
Well, I want to salute your work, Kristen.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you had to have such a horrible motivator.
Right.
Blessings and prayers for your mother and father.
Thank you.
And I hope your mom finds some degree in peace. I know she's got to be inspired by your work.
She
I want
is.
to thank you for doing
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
And so it's a shame what's happened there in Montana. Just recently, just this week, the Supreme Court ruled that they weren't going to overturn some of the newly implemented laws that the legislature had passed. Isn't that right? You want to tell our
I
audience
don't know.
about the current?
I've been so caught up.
You've been in
the
Washington
prisoner
now.
stuff, and I've not been caught up on the Montana stuff, but. It's crazy that the state of Montana does not want the legislatures and law enforcement, and the feds, they don't want marijuana there, but the people
Isn't that
do.
how always the people with the biggest economic incentive, the police agents and the prosecutors and the drug treatment people are the ones leading the charge to put money in their pocket, and by torturing us.
Yep.
It's more than irony.
Well, Paul, if you guys want to know more about current news that's going on in prison outreach, the Voices of the Cannabis War, me and Mindy and a couple other people, we write for the Northwest Leaf, We also write for the Oregon Leaf, and we also write for a magazine called the Vegas Cannamag. So you can find our information, what's the local news, nationals, all kinds of stuff that's going on in the war, different prisoners you can write to by going to their websites, getting their magazines, reading them, and you can go from there and start prison outreach right
We're
from,
down to
from
less than
magazines.
4 minutes. Mindy, do you have a local website, or you just work together?
I work with Kristen.
So your website, it's Vow?
Right now, we have a Facebook page. Our website itself is a baby website. It's just about to be launched within the next couple weeks, so it's still too new. But
It's a startup.
right, so in a couple weeks, Google the Voices of the Cannabis War, and you should find it.
I see.
In fact, we just applied for a 501c3 today, so
Good luck with that.
yeah.
So, Jeff, you want to give a plug again for your movie, how people can find out more about it?
I had one positive thing to say about
Please do.
about where we're at with this whole Megillah and the absurdity of people in prison for a plan. Is Bill Maher said after he lit a joint on his TV show the other night, he said that we got gay marriage, everybody. Supreme Court, hello, marijuana's next.
I certainly hope so.
So you can reach me and my film, and you can see clips, and some of our episodes are coming up at www.lifersthemovie.com, and just spread the word, and look out for me. I'm that close to getting into filming Jimmy Romans in federal. They denied me, but on a technicality, and I've cleaned that technicality up, so I'm going to go in again. And once I get into federal, there's no stopping us, and I'm going to bring these gals with me. I'm now aligning with these gals. It's the first time I've been with them and with all you, and praise Jack. We're gonna do it for you, Jack Herrera. We love you, man, and I know you're looking down on us and helping us with everything we're doing.
All right, thank you. So, Casper, you want to give a plug for radio? Casper's got a little radio network too. Maybe you guys could align.
I did.
He's been doing.
Come on, baby.
He started doing his show, Time for Hemp, with Jack Herrera, and did television for about a year in the Los Angeles area, starting in the early 90s.
Considered the father of marijuana TV, oddly enough, and it has blossomed now into a 20-hosted broadcasting network heard on iHeartRadio, Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and we are now on Roku TV. Lots of great free downloads to explore, so you can put all your smart devices to work by trying to let the whole world know how important it is to take time for hemp. Thank you, Paul.
And of course, we have been helping people get their medical marijuana permits all over the country. If you are a loved one, need to find a doctor who can help you obtain your state's permit for medical marijuana, then you should call us at this toll-free number, 1-800-723-0188. That's 1-800-723-0188. We've helped over 250,000 Americans over the past dozen years get their medical marijuana permits, including in Montana.
Yeah.
And we're happy to be able to continue to do that. If you're here in Portland, you can call us locally at 503-281-5100. Hey, I want to thank you again, Kristen Floor, Mindy Griffith,
Thank you.
Jeff Eichen, and our resident comedian,
Yes.
Mr. Casper Leach.
And don't forget our POWs, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jeff
And
Mazansky, all the ones that have been out too.
So tune in next week, and we will be working with you to try to restore hemp. Good night.
Paper, fiber, fuel,
And medicine.
and medicine
So
and food.
we, John Cornette was here and ready to play music tonight, but he got sick and had to leave. So hopefully he'll feel better next week. Bye-bye. Restore hemp.